Hi, boys and girls. I am back and I am going to read Chapter 7 of The Missing Magic, and Chapter 7 is called Pills and Powders. The Pocus pills were tiny and very colorful, like the sprinkles on cupcakes. They even smelled sugary. As far as pills went, they didn't seem so bad, but the animals didn't want to take them. Picnic wouldn't stay still long enough, and Dippity turned up his nose. Clover thought holding the salamanders would help her give them their pills, although she worried they might be too hot to hold. Hotter than baked potatoes. They weren't, but they didn't take their pills either. They seemed to like being picked up so much they fell asleep as soon as they were in her hands. Clover needed another plan. When she was putting the salamanders back in their tank, she remembered how to feed Esmeralda, the toad, her vitamins by mixing them in with some squashed flies. Maybe disguising the pills would work. So Clover slid a Pocus pill into a hollowed out pepper, and Flame actually ate it. Ash ate his too. She used the same trick with the rest of the animals, hiding the pills in their favorite foods, except for Neptune. Since he was so well trained, Clover didn't have to hide the pill, which was good because she wasn't sure what to hide it in. Seafoam wouldn't work. For the unicorn, she hid the pills in apple slices. They gobbled them up, all except Plum. He kept nudging his bucket, which still smelled like the cinnamon raisin oatmeal from the night before. Now you're being picky, Clover sighed. Plum whinnied. But Clover looked at him sternly and held out the apple slice. Eat up. You need this. And at last, Plum did. After Oliver had phoned Sabin and found out Blizzard was fine, he volunteered to blow on the ashes in the rookery while Clover gave the animals their medicine. When she checked, the ashes didn't seem to be glowing any brighter. To distract herself from worrying, Clover began work on the new wish book, while Oliver went upstairs to research magical water animal diseases. The wish book was an important part of the agency. It was for customers to record requests for animals the agency didn't have. The old wish book had been chewed to pieces by Picnic, so Mr. Jams ordered a new one. With a big gilt cover, it looked identical to the first, except that its pages were blank. Clover's job was to copy as much as she could still read from the old book. It was a time-consuming task, even if she was getting better at using the drippy quill pen. The one good thing was that she didn't have to record any requests that had been filled. She came across quite a few, and each one made her happy, especially this entry. Miss Opal, fortune teller, looking for a mood creature, Firefly preferred. There was a check mark beside it that Clover had put there herself at the beginning of the summer. I wonder if Miss Opal could see into the future and tell me how long Oliver is going to be at the agency. And what about me? Will I be able to stay on once school starts? She was tempted to give the fortune teller a call, but if she was going to ask for a fortune, shouldn't she ask about the animals? Maybe the fortune teller could see what their sickness was. Wasn't that really what mattered? Then she remembered that fortune tellers, especially Miss Opal, often spoke in riddles, and what she needed right now was a clear answer. Clover didn't notice her quill pen was dripping until Oliver walked in. You're getting ink everywhere, he commented, and your penmanship. Penmanship is your handwriting. Don't you have other things to do? Asked Clover, her cheeks flaring. Why are you here? It's the animals' supper time, he replied. I've set my alarm wand to alert me to all the meal times at the agency. It is very handy. So now he has an alarm wand. Remember, he had the one for cooking earlier too. It's the animals' supper time, he replied. I've set my alarm wand to alert me to all the meal times at the agency. It is very handy. Clover rolled her eyes, but it was time to feed the animals their suppers, so she put the book away. The animals didn't seem better, just the opposite. In fact, both of Picnic's ears were visible, and the tips of her wings too. The fairy horses looked bigger, and the hippocampus smaller, definitely smaller. His collar had slipped off and was lying on the seaweed at the bottom of the tank. Wait until the morning, said Oliver. It's common knowledge that Pocus pills need at least 12 hours to take full effect. Clover hoped that for once, Oliver, Mr. Know-it-all, was correct. That night during supper, Clover thought of Emma. Although Emma read lots, like Oliver, she never acted like a know-it-all. She was nice to everyone. Clover realized she hadn't received a postcard from Emma in a while. She's probably too busy making lots of new friends at Pony Camp, thought Clover. Would Emma seem different when she saw her again in the fall? Clover knew she herself had changed. Would they still be best friends? And how would she keep the agency a secret, especially if she was still volunteering there? As though her mom could read her mind, she said, "Have you thought about continuing at the agency when school starts, Clover? I know you've been enjoying it." "I'd love to," replied Clover, "and I really want to. But there's another volunteer and the more help the merrier, I always say," said her dad. "Your mother and I couldn't imagine working without each other." Clover didn't say anything, but she had no trouble at all imagining working without Oliver. "Oliver, what's going on?" Clover cried the next morning when she entered the agency to the sound of loud barking. Was it Picnic? He never barked. The noise was coming from the small animal's room. There, she found Oliver standing on a chair beside one of the large, empty cages at the back of the room. Picnic perched on the top edge of the cage. It was him barking, and no wonder. He was stuck. He was almost completely visible, and the cutest puppy she had ever seen. With sunshiny fur and floppy ears and two feathery golden wings that he was flapping frantically with every bark. So let's go back and I'm going to read it again, and this time I want you to really visualize what Picnic looks like, because so far he's been invisible and the only thing that was showing was the tip of his nose and the tips of his paws. So now when Clover walks in, she says he was almost completely visible and the cutest puppy she had ever seen, with sunshiny fur, meaning it's yellowy, and floppy ears, and two feathery, remember, like soft, like bird feathers, golden wings that he was flapping frantically with every bark. But the wings weren't lifting him up off the top of the tank. They seemed much smaller than the wings Clover had felt when he was invisible. Just as Picnic was appearing, his wings were disappearing. He must have flown up there, but now he can't fly down. Clover thought aloud. "I know. I've been trying every appropriate spell," said Oliver breathlessly, turning to Clover, a wand in his hand. He paused when he saw her. "Oh, you, look. Now wasn't the time for another one of his lectures." "Well, no wonder he won't come down," Clover interrupted. "Not when you're pointing that at him. Here, let me." Clover stepped on a chair too. "Jump down. Come on, Picnic. There's a good puppy," she coaxed. Picnic stopped flapping. "Come on." Clover reached up and the puppy leaned forward and leapt into her arms. He gave her a happy lick and then squirmed free and bounded off. He really was the cutest puppy she had ever seen, but he wasn't supposed to be seen. So, are you guys ready? Before I start reading the next page, I'm going to show you a picture. Let's see if it's what you predicted he would look like. Super cute. So he's the color of sunshine, and he's got gold wings that are super, super soft. His ears are very soft and floppy. All right. The magic kittens weren't displaying any of their magic, and Dippity, lying on top of their cage, was all white except for her one green ear and green paws. So picture that. Here's Dippity now, and she only has one green ear, and then her paws are green. Everything else is white. Clover couldn't see the fire salamanders at first until she looked closer and realized they were hiding in the shade. which was very unusual for such heat-loving creatures. Maybe they're sick now too, she thought. The fairy horses were the worst off, all squished in their cages like sardines. So there's a simile. Think of, and if you don't know what sardines are, they're like canned fish. They come in a can. Usually it has a top that has a little, like a little latch on the top, like a soda can has a latch that you pull up. This is the sardines come in a can and you pull it back and there's little fish inside of there that you can eat. You can ask your mom and dad and they can tell you more about sardines if you've never seen them before in the store. So they're sardines, what the author's trying to get with the simile is that the sardines are packed together in a can, and so are the fairy horses, and I'll show you a picture of that. Where before the ferns were like trees to them, now the horses towered over them like giants. Tansy's nose even reached the top of the cage and she was licking to the latch. Butternut and Buttercup were pushing against each other, vying for space, and Acorn was standing in the water dish because there was no other room left. "We have to get them out of there," said Clover. "But where will they go?" asked Oliver. "In the stables, I guess." Clover opened the cage and lifted Tansy out. She was heavier than Dippity. So Tansy, the miniature fairy horse, is now heavier than Tansy the cat. Dippity the cat. Tansy's the fairy horse, sorry. So Tansy the fairy horse is now heavier than Dippity the cat. "Don't just stand there, help me." Oliver put his wand away and awkwardly lifted Buttercup out. Right away she bared her teeth and nipped his hand. "Aw," he yelled, stumbling back and knocking into Clover. "Watch out," she scolded. Luckily, she was holding Tansy tight and didn't drop the fairy horse. Oliver, on the other hand, was clearly not holding Buttercup properly. The dappled horse jumped out of Oliver's arms and landed gracefully on the floor. So dappled, when they say the dappled horse, that's like spots. Dappled dogs are dogs that have the spots. Usually they're like the gray and black, and sometimes they have the brown in them, almost like a leopard. So that's a dappled. So the horse was dappled. Seeming only too happy to be free, she began to prance around the room, whinnying loudly. "What should I do?" cried Oliver. "Catch her," said Clover. So Oliver chased Buttercup, who began to gallop, tossing her mane like a flag. So again, the flag blows in the wind. So the author's comparing the mane of Buttercup to the flag. Dippity watched, looking amused. So she's sitting there laughing at the whole thing. It was pretty funny, but Tansy was getting heavy. "Come on," said Clover. Oliver huffed to a stop. "Really, these animals are not well trained." "It's not the animals, it's you," she said. Oliver's face fell, and Clover almost felt bad. Then Buttercup pranced by, and Oliver got his arms around her at last. "Aha," he said smugly, lifting her back up. "Good," said Clover. "Come on." The not-so-fairy horses were actually a lot heavier than Dippity. By the time Clover got Tansy into a stall in the stables, her arms ached. Oliver put Buttercup in the same stall. The two horses happily explored, sniffing the hay and buckets and swishing their tails. The unicorns were not as pleased. They looked bewildered. So bewildered means like they're wondering, they're not sure what's going on. And it was no wonder. Their horns were half the size they used to be. And it wasn't just their horns that were changing, they were changing colors too. Instead of milky white, they were an assortment of hues and patterns, cream and spotted, chestnut and patched, just like the horses at Emma's pony camp. "Oliver, those pills didn't help at all," said Clover. "It's very perplexing," he agreed. "It's more than that," said Clover. "It's time for the vet. You move Acorn and Butternut. I'm going to call Dr. Nurch." The phone rang a few times and Clover fiddled with the charm, worried that the vet might be out. Dippity hopped up on the desk. "Do you know what's going on?" Clover asked her kitten. Dippity didn't respond as he usually would, with a twitch of his tail. He just meowed like an ordinary cat and curled up on the desk. Clover rubbed behind his ears as the phone went to the answering machine. "You've reached Dr. Nettie Nurch," said a gruff voice. "I'm either out on a call or—" Clover was about to give up when there was a click and a loud bleating in the background. Then, "Shush, Nanny." "Hello? What ails your animal?" "Dr. Nurch, it's Clover at the MAAA. The pills didn't work. Picnic is more visible and the fairy horses are huge. They're losing their magic, no doubt about it." Clover stammered, a terrible thought swirling in her head. Are they becoming ordinary?" "I don't have experience with ordinary animals, but it appears so," said Dr. Nurch, sounding less gruff and more worried as she went on, almost as if she was talking to herself. "Can't say I'm surprised with what's happened here. What do you mean? My nanny's not herself either. It seems she too has the sickness. It must be very contagious. Have you tried the powder?" "No, not yet. Give it a go. Dust the animals with it. That should help. Watch out for sneezing. I'll visit by foot tomorrow. First thing, rest assured, I'll find a cure." "Okay," said Clover, taking heart, "but you best put up a quarantine sign." "Quarantine? What's that?" asked Clover. "You know, shut down the agency, don't let any animals in or out, and be extra careful with cleanup. Can't let this spread, especially when we don't know what we're dealing with." That's just what we're dealing with, and it's funny that I'm reading this in your read aloud, and that's what we're all under, is a quarantine. That's why we're not going to school. That's why we're not able to go out, and we're only supposed to be going out if we have a doctor's appointment, or if we have to go to the grocery store or pick up food or go to work. So we're under a quarantine because we don't know who has the coronavirus and who doesn't, and if you're able to catch it, and if you get it, you can get very, very sick. Some people have been really sick to where they don't make it through the illness, so it's very, very serious. So now that's what Dr. Nurch is telling Clover, that they're under a quarantine, that no animals can come in and no animals can go out. So she's letting her know, be extra careful with your cleanup because they can't let it spread. Immediately, Clover's hope faltered. Really, but too late. There was a loud bleating again, followed by another click, and Dr. Nurch was gone. "How will I make the sign? I don't even know how to spell quarantine," finished Clover, slumping in her chair. She could ask Oliver. He would know, but she didn't want to. No matter how it was spelled, quarantine still meant that the agency, her agency, was closed. So there's a picture of Clover putting up the quarantine sign to close the agency. And that was chapter 7. So of course chapter 8 is going to be called Quarantined. And your assignment for chapter 7 is going to be, what does the main character or characters learn in this chapter? So what does Clover and Oliver, because they're the main characters, what do they learn in this chapter? They learned a lot of things about the animals and what was going on. So you need to go back, and if you have to re-listen to the chapter again, listen to it again, and maybe make notes about things that they learn about each of the different animals along the way, and that will be your reading response. So I hope you enjoyed it. We're getting down to the end. There's 12 chapters, so we only have 5 more to go. So until chapter 8, I will wish you a good rest of your day, and I hope that you're safe. Maybe you can have this conversation with your parents about the animal adoption agency being under a quarantine just like we are, and maybe you can compare the two. Make those connections from your life and the real world to what we're reading, you know, the text to world connection or text to self connection. So you can do that and make those connections. So from my heart to your heart, I miss you greatly. I hope you stay safe, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.